Welcome to the Body of Knowledge course. I'm Andrew Gibbons. Welcome to day 4. In the first 3 days, we looked at 3 varieties, 3 different ways of bending the spine, side bending, forward, and then combining it into circles. And we're going to actually look at this particular pattern one more time, but we're going to look at it in 2 new contexts in sitting. So none of this, just so you know, is necessarily prescriptive. This is not about how you should move your spine. This is simply an exploration of some of the ways that you may be able to use your spine. And of course, along the way, I'm going to drop particular principles, ideas, strategies that will help inform you as to what's better and worse, how you might creatively explore the different ways to use your spine. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to make a small distinction one more time about the varieties of the way that the spine can move. We looked at the ways in which the spine might bend to the side. That's something the spine can do. We looked at ways in which the spine can bend forward or backward. And of course, we also looked at ways in which the spine can combine all those directions together. There is a third way in which the spine can move. It can maintain its length. In other words, rather than taking the 2 ends and folding them together, you can move in a circle. You can move forward and back. You can move side to side in such a way that you don't actually bend to make the movement, but you essentially keep the length of the spine. Yeah? What does that look like? Well, in terms of going to the side, I could bend to go this way. I could also do this. Now, maybe we call that a tilt. Maybe you call that a lean. I don't know which word is most accurate for you. But just notice that here, I'm not really changing the internal distance between the top and the bottom. I'm not doing this to get my head over there. I'm not doing that to get myself over there. Yeah? The same is true in going forward and back. The options are to bend forward like this, to bend backward like this. But I could also just go forward without any particular rounding in the spine, almost as if I was maintaining my spine like a stick or like a rod. Now we have to be careful with these words because, of course, your spine is not a stick and your spine is not a rod, but it has the capacity to behave like one. You can organize yourself with that kind of integrity through your spine, and you might want to learn how to do that, especially when you're having to carry weight. Yeah? To have to give somebody a heavy plate at Thanksgiving like this may not be the best course of action. It may be easier to actually maintain the length of the spine and pass the plate of potatoes or turkey on like that. So you can see how all of the features and the functions of the spine, how you employ them in different situations, that's the art. Okay? So one of the ways to begin to think about circling is to do it with your spine long. So now you can imagine that instead of rounding and bending and circling, which obviously this stick will not do, you need a much thinner stick, you can circle more like this. Yeah? Where essentially the distance between the top of the stick and the bottom is always going to be more or less the same. Now, I've touched on this before in a video I did called What is Good Posture that looked at the first lesson in the book Awareness Through Movement, and this is kind of similar. The idea is just to first maintain or measure a distance between where you contact the chair or the stool and the crown of your head, and then you can practice just taking your head in a circle, but without actually shortening, compressing, bending, or folding yourself to do it. Now, how is that done? Well, you really have to understand how to use the space way down here in your sit bones, and you also have to understand that the part of the pelvis that's actually in contact with the chair is something that you can move a little backwards as you bow forward. You can glide the sit bones a little bit forward as you go back. You can turn, yeah? The skin of your buttocks literally provides something over which the bones of the pelvis can slide and glide just a little bit. That's one of the tricks. So if you're going to make a circling movement here, right, take my head in the path of a circle, I'm clearly, in some cases, I'm turning my spine. Yeah, if I make these movements, you can see that my chest is changing its orientation. I'm keeping the stick really just flush against my chest here so you can see all the different directions that I might go. And this is useful to help you because the difference is if I were to make these movements in rounding, it would look like this. Yeah? Now you don't need to have a stick handy, even though you might have a broom handle in your house or your kitchen somewhere. You can simply do this with your arms. And you can see that rounding will take the arms down and up, side bending this and this. But what if you make the circle with the top of your head without changing the length of your spine at all? Or doing your best, at least, to maintain that space. So this is just another variation that you can work with. You can, of course, challenge yourself if you want to. You could simply be sitting with the two sides of the pelvis relatively evenly over the floor, so you're not letting one side sink, or you're not having to hoist one side up. But your only point of contact is through one side of the pelvis, and you still can explore these kinds of movements. And you'll see what the value of really having a clear sense of support under one side of the pelvis is for. Yeah. You can try that on the other side. If you've ever had to sit on crowded public transportation where you may not get a two-buttock seat for your commute home, the value of this will seem quite apparent. Because how are you going to be comfortable as you ride if you can only have support through one side? Well, you want to be able to use this other leg very clearly. You want to understand the difference between 45 minutes on a bus like this or 45 minutes on a bus like that. Use the leverage of the leg, find the space up through the spine, and be able to adjust to all the movements that the bus or the subway might be taking. You know? So that's really, this is just a short lesson, but just understand the distinction between making the movements circling by actually rounding and bending the spine and having the middle of the spine move equal and opposite to the top and the bottom, versus, I guess I don't even need the stick for this, versus keeping the line of the spine, the integrity of that, even no matter where you go. Yeah? And the amount, this was a rather large circle I'm doing to demonstrate it, but the amount of the movement is really up to you, and it doesn't need to be much. It can simply be something that you practice almost without anybody noticing. One of the joys of making the movement small and more internal is that you can get a little bit more specific with yourself as to how you sense how the length is maintained. These movements that you've been making with the spine long are kind of the way that a long stick would inscribe the shape of a cone in space, with the point of the cone down on the surface and the base of the cone up in the air. Yeah. Well, to practice being able to keep your spine long, you can pick a very, very small circle to work with. But just imagine that you're drawing a circle using your entire spine, like it's one long pencil, as if you're drawing a circle on the ceiling. Yeah? Now, if you draw the circle in such a way that as you go into certain parts, you do this, well, guess what? Your pencil head has fallen away from the surface. You're no longer drawing a circle. So this image of being able to figure out, how can I find the length through there so that the point of contact is still available, or do I come here and go, ugh, as I come into this part of the circle? That particular study of where are all the places that I compress myself to continue moving, this is a very, very useful and important strategy to develop over time. It's something that we'll use in pretty much all of the subsequent lessons, and it's just a foundational skill in being able to understand how you use the space inside the body, how you actually sense the length of your spine in any activity. And as we go, I'll give you more specific details on what to look for. Okay? But that's all for today. Thanks again. I'm Andrew Gibbons. This is the Body of Knowledge course. I'll see you next time.